On March 25, 1973, in a quiet corner far from the noise of the White House, inside what was known as the Library Room, four men representing the most powerful economies in the world gathered for a meeting that was never meant to be public. There were no cameras, no press briefings, and no official protocols. It was a closed-door discussion called by George Shultz, who invited his counterparts from France, Germany, and Britain to confront a financial shock that threatened to destabilize the entire global system. The world economy had just been shaken at its core. President Richard Nixon had ended the dollar's convertibility into gold, effectively dismantling the post-war monetary order. Soon after, the Arab oil embargo sent energy prices soaring, pushing Western economies into a dangerous mix of inflation and stagnation. The future suddenly looked uncertain and potentially catastrophic. Out of that quiet, secretive meeting, later referred to as the Library Group, a new idea began to take shape. Among those present were influential figures like Helmut Schmidt and Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, who recognized that traditional global institutions were too slow and rigid to respond to rapidly evolving crises. What the world needed, they believed, was a small, agile circle of powerful nations capable of acting quickly and decisively, a kind of executive club for managing global instability behind closed doors. This vision soon became reality. In November 1975, leaders from 6 nations, the United States, France, Britain, Germany, Italy, and Japan, met at the historic Château de Rambouillet. Hosted with the support of U.S. President Gerald Ford, this gathering marked the birth of what became known as the Group of Six. Within a year, Canada joined, transforming it into the Group of Seven. But these summits were far more than symbolic gatherings. They became the real engine room of global economic coordination. In 1985, inside New York's Plaza Hotel, the group reached a landmark agreement to intentionally weaken the U.S. dollar in order to restore competitiveness to American exports in the face of Japan's rising dominance. This became known as the Plaza Accord, a clear demonstration of how coordinated decisions among a few leaders could reshape global markets almost instantly. The 1980s also marked the ideological high point of economic liberalism, led by the powerful alignment between Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. Privatization, deregulation, and reduced government intervention became the dominant global economic model. Then came a turning point. With the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet sphere, the group faced a critical question. Should it remain an exclusive Western club or evolve to include former adversaries? The answer unfolded gradually. Mikhail Gorbachev was invited to attend the 1991 London summit, symbolizing a new era. As Boris Yeltsin took power, efforts intensified, particularly under Bill Clinton, to integrate Russia into the group. The goal was not economic strength, but political alignment, to stabilize Russia, secure its nuclear arsenal, and anchor it within the Western system. In 1998, at the Birmingham Summit, this effort culminated in the official transformation into the Group of 8, with Russia as a full member. For a moment, it seemed like a unified global order had emerged. During the early 2000s, the G8 projected itself as a kind of global steward. Summits in places like Gleneagles and Okinawa addressed major global issues, from disease in Africa to debt relief for the poorest nations. In 2005, Tony Blair led a major initiative to cancel debts for heavily indebted countries, reinforcing the image of the group as a moral force in the global economy. Yet, beneath this image, cracks were widening. Emerging powers such as China and India were rising rapidly, but remained outside this elite circle, highlighting a growing mismatch between global reality and the group's composition. That tension became impossible to ignore after the global financial crisis. The collapse exposed the limits of the G8's influence. In response, George W. Bush convened a broader coalition of 20 major economies, giving rise to the G20 as the new center of global economic coordination. Meanwhile, relations with Russia deteriorated. Under Vladimir Putin, tensions escalated over issues such as the Iraq War, NATO expansion, and regional conflicts. The breaking point came in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. In response, the other members canceled the planned summit in Sochi and met instead in Brussels, suspending Russia and reverting to the G7 format. Today, the group faces a new era of uncertainty. Rising inflation, geopolitical rivalry, and especially the ascent of China as a competing superpower have reshaped the global landscape. Recent summits, from Hiroshima to Bavaria, have focused less on expanding globalization and more on securing supply chains, reducing dependencies, and navigating a fragmented world order. In the end, the story of the G8 is not just about economic coordination. It is about power, ambition, and the limits of control. What began in a quiet room in 1973 as an attempt to manage global crises has evolved into a complex narrative of shifting influence, revealing a fundamental truth. Economic dominance is never permanent, and no small group can indefinitely shape the destiny of an ever-changing world.